And we're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call this meeting to order of Pony River Village Council. It's Wednesday, June the 14th at 5 o'clock at the Pony River Municipal Office. So first of all, the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment that sustains all life, protecting the future for those generations to come. Anyone with pecuniary interest?
None.
I have one. New business item 5.
Okay. So this introduction. Okay, I'm going to read an introduction because this is a planning item that we have tonight. So we now move into the statutory public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment for a site on Exmo Street known as the Marina Lands. I want to take a moment to provide an overview of how we will proceed for everyone attending. We will first receive a presentation from the planning team from the county. This will be followed by an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Council will then be able to ask staff or applicants questions. Following this, we will have an open public meeting portion for tonight. If you are registered to speak, I will call your name and you will have 10 minutes to ask questions or provide your comments. Once I have gone through the list of speakers, I will open the floor for any speaker who has not registered. If you wish to speak, you can identify yourself in here in council chambers or identify yourself online. Once the public speaking opportunity is completed, we will close the public meeting and council can ask the applicant or staff any follow-up questions. We will then complete the public meeting by providing direction to staff. Anyone attending who has spoken at this meeting or who wishes to be notified of the decision of council should register by contacting the village office in writing. Before we begin the meeting, Mr. Burns, our CAO, could you please confirm the method of notice for the application?
So the application was advertised in the Sarnia Observer on May 23rd and May 25th, and notices were provided to adjacent landowners and agencies on May 23rd, and this meets the requirements of the Planning Act.
One more thing, just anyone that does get up to speak, just remember that we would like your address and your name and your address before you begin speaking. So thank you. I'm going to ask the planning team now for their presentation. So I'll let you introduce yourselves, please.
We'll be doing this one at a time.
Okay.
Well, good evening, Mayor Han, members of the council. My name is Ken Melanson. I'm the manager of planning and development for the county of Lambton, and we provide planning services to 10 of our 11 member municipalities, including Point Edward. Tonight's a very exciting night for Point Edward because one of the major sites and locations that you've identified for future growth is before you for consideration of a zoning bylaw amendment. Here tonight, we have a couple members of our team. We have the planner who is assigned to Point Edward, Jared Preston, who will be doing the presentation. I also want to identify that one of our newest members is here, and Johan Chandy, who is actually the planner for Warwick. He's here just to simply observe and continue his learning and development. So following my brief introductory remarks, I'll turn it over to Jared. He will be doing the bulk of the presentation. I'll do some final concluding remarks, and then we can continue on the agenda. I just want to bring the council's attention. We're doing this presentation a little bit differently tonight. We're trying a new style. As you know, our presentations tend to be bulky PowerPoints with a lot of words and a lot of graphics and maps. We're just going to do graphics and maps tonight. All the stuff that would normally be the bulky words, Jared's going to speak to you instead. We think this might be a little bit easier and puts the focus on us to give you that information directly. So with that, I'm going to vacate this seat and let Jared come up and begin the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor Hand, members of council and the public. My name is Jared Preston. I'm one of the planners for the County of Lambton, as well as a planner for the Village of Point Edward. I'll be presenting this rezoning application for the marina lands on Exmouth Street. The applicant is 285-8946 Ontario Ltd, and they're represented by agent Zelenka Priamo Ltd. The purpose of this application is to rezone the marina lands to facilitate townhome developments of approximately 156 units. I can go. This photo is showing the marina land site across from the boat docks. This photo shows the marina land site across from the Sarnia Harbor entrance. This photo shows the marina land site across from the corner of Exmouth, also besides the Cargill property. And this is a photo of the industrial lands owned by Cargill Limited. And as you can see on this Schedule A zoning map, the lands that are highlighted are the ones that will be rezoned to residential marina 1.6. This application has been reviewed by staff and conforms to the policies in the PPS, County Official Plan, Point Edward Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw. The proximity to the industrial use is recognized and will be addressed through the plan of condominium and site plan stages. For these reasons, the holding symbol will be retained on the site until servicing is finalized and proximity issues are resolved. At the time of report writing, no comments have been received. However, subsequently, comments were received from the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, the City of Sarnia, and a number of adjacent property owners or residents. Now, should council approve the proposed zone bylaw amendment, the applicant would need to go through a draft plan of condominium to create future lots. Completion of this step would be followed by site plan approval and removing the holding symbol to permit construction. Staff recommend council proceed with the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Thank you for my presentation.
Thank you, Jared. Okay, are there any questions of council?
For your worship, I just
Sorry.
have a couple of
Yep.
concluding remarks. That's a bit.
Okay, sorry.
I was expecting us to sit at the dual desk. That's
Oh.
okay. I just want to touch on a couple of items that have come up in some of the public comments and letters that have been received. In particular, the issue related to proximity to an industrial use. A couple of things, as council is well aware, this site has been zoned for residential for some time. So part of the zoning bylaw amendment is to take the three existing residential zones and compress them into one. But it is also taking a piece that is not zone residential and adding that into the residential area. But this site has been designated for residential for quite some time in your official plan and in your zoning bylaw. It is recognized, as we mentioned, the proximity to the industrial use. There are provincial guidelines that will have to be addressed by the applicant in the design of the site when it comes to the plan of condominium and the future site plan. These are the more appropriate places to actually address the issue, because that's where you can get into things such as designing the buildings to address some of the sound nature issues. You could also include berming, landscaping, fencing, etc. And I'll leave that to the applicant to address when the time is right for them to present. Beyond that, just simply want to mention that the site will be serviced via the village, not the city. So in the city's letter, they mentioned concerns that the services would come from them. That has never been the intention, and we've been very clear with the applicant. It will be serviced through the village. With that, I thank council for listening to our joint presentation, and we are open to questions.
I'll start at the end then. Councillor Burgess, do you have any questions?
No.
Deputy Mayor Grimes?
None at this time. Nothing.
Counselor. Thank you so much. Okay, I would now ask the applicant to identify themselves, and you have 10 minutes to address council, please. And then we may have questions after the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, members of council, mayor, and neighbors and staff. My name is Caitlin Crowley. I am the planner with Salinka Priamo here on behalf of the applicant. I work out of London, but I do a lot of projects and planning projects, all over Ontario. So like I said, I'm here for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application on the Marina lands. I first wanted to thank Mr. Melanson and his staff for their presentation and summarizing the proposal this evening. And the residential project for these lands. I would like to start by reiterating that these lands are currently zoned and designated for residential lands or for residential uses, which does include the proposed townhouse use, which is essentially what we're here to talk about tonight. The purpose of this application was to study the portion of the lands that is currently zoned EP1 or Environmental Protection 1. So through this application, we have assessed those lands. And our ecologist has determined that zoning is outdated and that it no longer has to be zoned environmental protection, and it can be now consolidated into the existing residential zones. And then through conversations with Mr. Melanson and Mr. Burns, it was decided that administratively it would be better if all of the zones were consolidated into one, for one cohesive residential zone that allowed for permissions that are already on the lands. So through this process, the village, again, administratively just wanted to consolidate it all into one, and it was determined through, different studies that EP1 zone didn't have to be on the property anymore. So through the rezoning application process, all required materials were submitted, with the caveat that a future draft plan of condominium application would be submitted, future site plan application would be submitted, and more detailed design would be submitted through both of those processes. So prior to this meeting, we did receive comments from the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority. The Conservation Authority was consulted through the application process, through the review process. And generally they were supportive of the development, obviously, again, with the idea that we would study that current EP1 zone. And through the letter that we received, they didn't have any concerns with the overall proposal, with the rezoning application for this property. However, they did state that they would, through future applications, seek that the flood hazard lands to the north of our property would be environmental protection zone. That currently is not within the scope of this application. However, we would consider that at a future date if it was necessary. However, for the scope of this, they generally had no concerns with the residential zoning on this property. Prior to this meeting, we did also receive a letter from Cargill, which is located to the south, just south of Axmouth Street in the city of Sarnia. So we did review this letter, and we were able to kind of, review their comments, and hopefully tonight we can mitigate some of the concerns. But this project was not intended at all to limit Cargill's current operation, operating at full capacity, or limit their productivity in any way. So this project is obviously, these lands have always been zoned, or not always, but have been zoned and designated for residential for quite some time. Through this application, we would not be seeking any urban encroachment. Again, as we're not expanding the growth boundary in any way, this is within the settlement area of Point Edward. And so through the proposed residential development, we would be addressing the compatibility concerns through our development. And by doing that, we, have undertaken a noise study already, which would be submitted through the draft and condominium process. But through this noise study, we have already got draft recommendations from our noise consultant. Essentially stating that, through construction measures, through building materials, and we could mitigate noise from Cargill to the proposed development. And through a potential noise barrier and through unit setbacks from that south property line, we could also mitigate these concerns. So there's different noise measures that we would definitely be proposing through the draft plan of condominium process to mitigate any noise concerns to future residents of the proposed development. We would also, I spoke with our noise consultant before this meeting, but essentially we would also be looking to classify this property as a class 4 in the NPC 300 guidelines outlined by the MOECC. And what this class 4 category is essentially, we would be required to implement noise clauses for these units. So any future resident would know that Cargill is in operation. They would remain in operation as they are today. And any concerns, any mitigation concerns would be, displayed through those noise clauses. We would also be required to implement AC units for each of the residential units to limit the need for open windows at any time. We'd be looking to upgrade building materials for the purpose of noise and vibration mitigation. So essentially, implementing brick as opposed to siding, those type of things. With regards to the traffic concerns that were brought up from Cargill as well, it should be understood that Exmouth Street is within the city of Sarnia. So I know that the city of Sarnia had their council meeting on Monday, where council directed staff to provide comment on Exmouth Street and traffic concerns on Exmouth Street. And I did receive that letter today, and essentially the direction from the city of Sarnia was that they'd be obviously looking for Cargill to operate at full capacity. However, and for our traffic impact assessment, this development, the trip generation through this development would not impact that operation. And Exmouth Street was, and again, this property was always expected to be residential. It was expected that Exmouth Street would have to be the access point for the proposed development, as any other access point would potentially be impacted through flooding from Sarnia Harbor. So again, our traffic impact study that was submitted through the zoning amendment application, we did receive input from the city of Sarnia, from the Ministry of Transportation, and from the Village of Point Edward. And so it basically concluded that this development could be supported at this location. So based on the information provided through this application and additional information summarized tonight, we would encourage council to consider the current plan for this property and acknowledge that even without this application, the owner of this property could propose townhouses right now, excluding that EP1 zone. But realistically, they could develop townhouses today if they wanted to. And essentially through this application, we're just looking for some additional land. So looking to rezone those additional EP1 lands, provide for better functionality of the property, provide for additional landscape open space. We are proposing a multi-use trail along the canal as well, which again is for the public benefit and it's for the benefit of the functionality of the site overall. And so I just wanted to remind everybody that essentially that's what the scope of this zoning amendment is for. So I would like to thank everyone for their time tonight. I will also be available to answer any questions if any arise.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate. Any questions from council?
I have a couple if I may.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Ryan.
The canal that runs to the north of the property is very vital to Bridgeview Marina and accessing Guildwood. Do you have a good relationship with the marina and to guarantee that access?
I mean, we've had conversations with the marina. I believe that they would have been circulated through this application process as well. We haven't had direct connection with regards to that, but I can definitely, for future applications, we could definitely reach out to them and have those conversations.
You own half of the canal, is that?
To the north, I believe they own a portion of those units, yes.
Okay. You talked about the class 4 noise condition applying to Cargill. Will that also apply to the North Slip for the wintering of freighters and maintenance and their operations?
So that class 4, I believe, would just apply to the property outline that Ken showed in his PowerPoint presentation. So just the subject lands itself.
Right, but you're saying it was to deal with the noise from Cargill.
Oh, right, yeah, yes. Oh, sorry. So yes, it would deal with any additional lands as well.
Okay.
But it's essentially, the class 4 category is specifically for sensitive land uses, which are being implemented in a position with industrial use surrounding
Okay.
it.
So we cover all noises
Yes,
in that
that's
area.
correct. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. And then my last one was, Sarnia made a comment about the oversized load corridor and sharing it with the residents. And do you have any concerns about that? Because I know the oversized corridor has been designed, with no power lines, should be able to expedite getting a large vessel through there. Do you see it as a concern?
No, and I mean, our traffic impact assessment looked at that, it looked at any potential traffic from Cargill, from any surrounding uses. And essentially Exmouth Street is built to a capacity that it could accommodate that without any limitations, so.
That's all, Mayor Han.
Thank you.
I have one
Councilor
question.
Member?
This EP1 area that the rezoning application will take care of. What percentage of the property is this? Because looking at the one diagram, it's looks like it at one time could have been a possible canal for a previous development. I'm just wondering what, we're not talking the entire property.
Correct.
We're talking a portion of.
Yes, yeah, it looked to be about 25%. I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, essentially it just kind of came in as a sliver. And yes, through previous modeling, it was established that it was a potential flood hazard.
Yes.
However, through more recent modeling, it was determined that that was not the case and that there was no flood hazard there. There was wave uprush to the west, but again, that didn't impact the overall residential development. But essentially, that EP1 zone, it was determined through more recent modeling that it was not subject to flood hazard.
Yeah, not within your report.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it's now time for the public participation portion of this meeting. And I would ask of council a motion to open the public portion.
So moved.
Seconder,
Second that.
thank you. All in favor? Okay. So, I only have
Andrew Bolter.
Mr. Andrew Bolter,
Diane.
and then we have the late submission, so. You can come up and you have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you.
And remember, identify your audience as well.
Bolter, I live at 19 Moore Street, whatever. With my phone number.
No,
Okay. Think you know.
I don't need all that other, just to give everybody some free.
Yeah, so I didn't. I've gone over the agenda. I have some points I'd like to raise. First point is, I guess it's just very important in our community. Has our Indigenous community been consulted in regard to potential heritage issues or archaeological issues in this area? I know Point Edward has historically been an Indigenous area, and it's and we at the start of every meeting honor that. I'm just wondering if anyone has addressed that issue and approached our Indigenous friends and neighbors to consult on this development. The other thing I would like to mention is that the EP1 zone, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of information. I've seen the reports about this zone. From what I just heard, it's an EPA1 zone because of potential flooding, but I'm wondering what depth has an analysis been done of this as a natural habitat. I'm thinking in particular, we're in a bird migration routes in Point Edward. What is the impact going to be on wildlife, not just toads that might live there or creatures that live in the forest, but just generally? I think that's a very important thing that needs to be done, and I'm wondering if there has been an independent assessment of that EP1 area. The other thing I'd like to mention is in terms of flooding, I believe that that the goal is to look at 100-year events of flooding. So in the reports, it says that with wave uprush and 100-year flooding, that's, I guess, once every 100 years, you might get a mega storm. I'm just wanted to point out that we're seeing massive climate change now. We're seeing 100-year events happening every 5 to 10 years. in our climate and in our present situation. So I'm suggesting that 100-year flooding as a model, it's certainly not a valid model in today's world. And I would suggest that one has to be extremely careful in building in any area that is prone to flooding with that. Other aspects too, like what is the impact of moving forests and trees on wind? Because I know I think 10 years ago, we had a massive storm and the roof of the Holiday Inn got blown off. And I read somewhere, I forget where, that a woodlot in Point Edward that was raised not long ago, I guess, on the road into the casino, had previously acted as a buffer for the wind, the marina, and for the hotels along there. So I'm wondering, what is the impact to if you get rid of trees? Because trees do buffer wind. And I'm wondering too, how much land do we have in Point Edward that is environmentally protected zones? Are there any other areas? I think, if you're looking at this as a benefit to our community, why not have a development that protects that? And you can have forest trails, and you can make that area into an attractive area for the school kids to go and walk through for nature lovers, and you can do that with environmental sensitivity. And I think we don't have I can't think of anywhere else in Point Edward that is that kind of forest, that kind of woodlot, whatever you want to call it. I know with the changing climate, one of the preventative policy statements is we need to prepare for the impacts of climate change. And I would suggest that includes looking at these mega events that are going to occur, potential flooding in these areas. I'm also concerned, just access to this area, in the event of an emergency, limited access. And I'm also concerned, frankly, that part of the provincial mandate is that when we establish new housing in our communities, that we look at housing which is affordable to low and moderate income households. I would like to see that built into any plan, that the developer, whoever it might be, and unfortunately it's another company, we don't really know who it is, be required to include in this development low-income housing. I mean, true low-income housing. I'm even suggesting social housing, so that those people who are less fortunate have an opportunity to live in our community. From what I can see, these townhouses are going to be mid-range, and God knows what that is nowadays. I don't think I could afford one. So those are my main concerns. I'm a member of Climate Action Sarnia, and we have great concerns about loss of natural environment, loss of trees, loss of natural areas, impact on wildlife, impact on our ability to feel connected to nature. I think that's really important in any development. And I frankly would suggest that you need to take that into consideration. That's an asset we have in my community. Those are my submissions. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Sorry. I was going to ask our planner.
Yeah. Actually,
There's a
funnily enough,
couple,
we're both sitting next to each other, so I think
because there's a couple of points I know you can
We'll
address.
try to tag team. So through your worship, first thing to keep in mind is that as has been pointed out on several occasions, this is already zoned for development. So there are landowner rights to proceed at this point. The only difference is the EP1 zone. That said, the EP1 zone was put in place, as my colleague mentioned, because of old flood mapping that delineated a possible flood area. As our ability and the Conservation Authority's ability to map flood areas has improved and the modeling has changed and become more refined, that changes. So, flood lines that would have been outlined 10, 15 years ago have changed dramatically. It's also important to keep in mind that 1 in 100-year floods is what the MOE, the Ministry of Environment, sets as their criteria under legislation. So that's what they need to look at when it comes to dealing with environmental impacts related to flooding, wave uprush, etc. Now, there are policies within the county official plan that recognize when there's tree loss, there should be some level of compensation. And that'll be addressed through the plan of subdivision stage. But the reality is that the landowner is within their rights to develop the site, so there will be tree loss. That said, in terms of the question about affordable housing, there is no ability under the Planning Act for us to be able to impose or restrict a development to provide affordable, attainable, or even set rents. We regulate the use, not the user. And under the Provincial Planning Act, only certain municipalities that are designated through the legislation have been provided some powers. I'm blanking on the term. Help me out here. Something zoning, what is it? Inclusionary zoning, to be able to mandate that a percentage of units or compensation for that percentage of units has to be affordable. We, Point Edward, let alone the county of Lambton, are not one of those municipalities that are included. It's generally municipalities around the GTA and Ottawa, so the bigger cities. So anything that we do is really a conversation, and it's up to a developer to do that. It's important to recognize, though, in the housing continuum, that it's not just a matter of supply that helps bring down the cost, because we all know that getting supply of anything, an oversupply, then brings down cost. But it's also looking at the continuum of housing in terms of what's called the missing middle. And that's been a big issue here in the county. The missing middle is usually semi-detached, duplex, row and townhousing. And the fact that you're getting a development that is going to be the missing middle is very important, because the middle continuum is where you have an ability to get a level of density, but the costs for actually building the houses are not as expensive as, say, a one-off single or a large-scale multi-residential development, because then when you get into high-rise, you're talking concrete, glass, steel, engineering, etc. So is it going to be affordable? We're not in a position that we can mandate that. That's simply not available. I don't remember the rest. I think I'll let you pick up the rest.
Yeah, no, that was a very good summary. And, you know, in terms of the units that we're able to provide, again, we're requesting a zone that gives permission for potential apartment buildings or townhouses. And, you know, in general, that is a more affordable form of housing. And it's a variety of housing that Point Edward doesn't have a lot of. So that's essentially, you know, the goal that we're seeking to do through this. In terms of flood modeling as well, you know, our units are required to have I think it's a 178.3 meter minimum unit opening. So, you know, the units are going to be built up to mitigate any flood impact that would potentially happen here. So we have looked at that. We do also have an environmental impact study that was completed as part of the application that I can send you if you'd like. It is public knowledge at this point. So it does kind of speak to species at risk, and it speaks to the type of you know, species that would be on the property that you would potentially have to relocate. And you know, in terms of the Indigenous community, we did also provide an archaeological assessment that again would be public knowledge at this point. So it was, you know, it was considered throughout that assessment. We did have a reputable company go out to the site, and they, you know, did holes all over the place and essentially assessed the archaeological potential on the property, and it was deemed that no further assessment would be required after they completed theirs. I believe that was primarily. Oh, and there, in terms of access, there, we also are proposing an emergency access. So the primary access will be to the south on Exmouth Street, but there is an additional access just to the northwest, I believe, that will provide emergency access as well. Only for emergency purposes, but yeah.
Sorry, there was one other issue or one other point that was brought up about open space. I just wanted to mention that the golf course, you called it the land to the north. Many people in our community would recognize it as the Haldane Golf Course. That is left as open space and can't be developed.
Correct, yes.
Okay, am I done, or can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I just wondered if anyone had actually spoken to some of our local Indigenous historians like David Plain. You know, just consulted with the local community. That's all. You got an assessment done, a heritage assessment. Did anyone actually reach out to our local community? We're trying to have good relations. I think that would be a very important thing to do.
Thank you.
Mary Ann, Mr. Coulter also mentioned the effect, the wind buffer in the trees. Is there, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so, through this development, we would be implementing additional landscape. So while, yes, we are removing some of the trees, we would also be implementing a noise barrier around Exmouth Street and, a common amenity area for the future residents, and then perimeter landscaping as well, which would, again, maybe that would.
Just add, through you, your worship, to the deputy mayor, as we move forward through the process, one of the things that will solidify, so through the plan of condominium and also through the site planning process, will be exactly where all, to what extent, what trees are removed, because it may be that as they get into more detailed site design, that there may be pockets or strips or certain portions of trees that are not removed because it actually works within their landscaping intent. That'll be solidified more as we get to the site planning stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Park?
Hello, my name is Doug Park, owner of Parkland Farms at 2302 Confederation Line in Sarnia, Ontario. Thank you, Mayor Hand and councilors. I just wanted to point out how vitally important the Cargill elevator is to the farmers of southwestern Ontario. And when we do bring urban and agriculture together, quite often there's issues, and it's very important. I'm not opposed to housing. We all need a place to live. But it's vitally important that these safeguards put in, because there will be complaints. You cannot produce corn, soybeans, and wheat loaded on a boat and not have dust. For up to a kilometer away, there'll be dust. So there will definitely be complaints. So there has to be some strict safeguards for the next 100 years. It would be devastating for the farmers of southwestern Ontario to not have that great thermal where it is. The next closest one's in Windsor. So we talk about sustainability. Well, if we could drive our diesel trucks all the way to Windsor, that's a heck of a lot more fuel and less jobs in Sarnia land. And as a farmer that takes 800 to 900 truckloads of grain into the Cargill outlet, it's vitally important to our business. And I do have farms in the urban area around Blacklow and that. And 99% of them are great neighbors, but you are going to get complaints. It's just inevitable. And we've had to change how we farm in the Blackpool area because of complaints from urban people. And Cargill elevator was there since 1924, so they shouldn't have to make a bunch of changes in how they operate. And they could spend millions of dollars, but there's still going to be dust rolling over to those houses and condominiums. And I certainly recognize that we need housing. There's no question about that. Keep pushing agriculture into a smaller corner all the time, pretty soon we're in big trouble. So that's the concern I have.
I appreciate you speaking up for them. I'm sure they do too.
I certainly have
Yeah.
no
Any questions?
monetary value.
Yeah,
in
no.
Cargill. I'm just a farmer.
Yeah.
Not just a farmer.
Yeah.
A farmer.
A farmer that we need.
Somebody say thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't need to do that. Just buy stuff at the grocery store.
Just I just thought of something some time ago. They had an open house at Cargill and I went to it, and it was absolutely amazing because I didn't realize all of the different things that they do and where they ship to and all the products and things like that. So it was, if they ever do it again, it's really a worthwhile to attend it.
And an example of an issue that happened when Urban moved into Heritage Park, it's a great place, a lot of nice houses there. Procor's been there
Yeah.
for 40 years,
Yeah.
wanted to expand and there was a delegation to Heritage Park trying to squash it. So I mean, Cargill was there first.
Yeah.
Badly wounded.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's all I have to say.
Thanks, sir.
Now, I only have 2 speakers of note. Was there someone else that wanted to speak?
Back.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Pardo. I'm past chair of the Sarnia Land Industrial Alliance. Been a member of our community for some time. I'm still a board member for the Industrial Alliance. I did bring a note with me regarding some of the issues that we had faced. We sort of had some discussions and come up with about 5 sort of points that were not in opposition, but needed recognition. The first one of the points was to do that, and we read through the traffic study, and again, to address the traffic at Axel and Front Street, the increased amount, and sort of that was in relation to the Cargill situation at different times of the year.
Mhm.
We were concerned with the land use compatibility with the winter maintenance, repair for the growing traditional marine industry that operates at the end of Expo Street. That industry has been viable as all the marine industries there. It is noisy, there's welding, cutting, grinding, a lot of heavy equipment, people, storm calls, things that are going on there. And just recognition, because I think on the same line, there will be complaints over that as time goes by. The third point that we had raised was we're starting construction on the new dock at the end of the Expo Street now. Which is sort of the summation of the oversized load corridor, which stretches for 27 kilometers through starting in Lambton, and we call it the end of Expo Street out of the beginning or the end, depending on which way we look at it. And that corridor is something that we like to sort of class as economic development in progress, because it has started in 2014. The idea came together, and we've been working diligently to get all of the funding and work put in place, and we're sort of reaching a goal there. We certainly were well aware at the time that there was a residential zoning at that location. The reason the dock is a part of the oversized load corridor currently and still will remain that way is that there was only one dock owner that was willing to participate, and that was the city of Sarnia. So when the city of Sarnia and the county of Lambton and St. Clair all agreed to join forces to make the project happen, that dock was a logical place. We did have a look at 4 or 5 other places along the river, out as far as the old OPG site. That was the preference of all the contractors in the community. They would like to see that be the place of desire to have that at that point in time, and still currently OPG is not interested in having those conversations with us. Will that change? And I'd like to think it might, but I don't know the answer to that. So that's just kind of a little bit of the history. The oversized road corridor will represent a very large increase in commerce, trade, machinery coming and going. The new dock will allow bigger cranes to be in there for the roll-off facilities that'll be done for the big vessels, the big modules that will be coming our way. We've already had quite a number that have come through the dock facility. There's been improvements made on the southbound side of the Old Betterman dock as well. With power, with fencing and stuff like that to facilitate all of those. So again, more as a consideration to know that this is certainly a part and parcel of it. And again, it's always difficult for industry and residential to coexist together without complaints. We certainly see that the agricultural nature of the Cargill facility is noisy, dusty, and active more so during increased times. Making sure that there's a plan for mitigation for those things is paramount to our concerns. I think those are pretty much the thoughts. We did send these notes through to council, so
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to voice our opinion.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
You say you've sent those through to us already? Those comments?
They have been. They were sent out today, I believe.
Okay, by mail?
Yeah.
Okay,
By email.
okay. Could you leave me that?
Yes, okay.
Like, I just haven't seen them yet, so thank you.
Thank you.
We haven't seen them either yet.
They're there.
Your worship, if I
Yes, sir.
could, I just wanted to actually make a couple comments in relation to the last 2 speakers, just to kind of speak to it, and perhaps you'll jump in where I miss things. So in terms of the concerns about noise, as you heard throughout the staff and applicant presentation, there are mechanisms through the Ministry of Environment to have this site designated Class 4, which then creates a burden to the actual applicant or developer to then mitigate the noise. So it actually doesn't put the burden on the adjacent industrial and marine properties. It puts the burden on the landowner themselves to design the buildings to mitigate noise, design the site to mitigate noise as best as possible. This is where they also get into, if memory serves me correctly, caveats on title that basically say you are next to noisy stuff. Good luck calling. And I'll tell you, as a county, we run into this issue all the time. Not that I had to discuss this issue last night in another municipality at all, but just keep in mind that in the county official plan, all joking aside, there's a policy. And I think it's very important to hear, particularly when we're dealing with these applications. And coincidentally, we had to deal with this issue last night. But it recognizes this interface issue, and we have it out in our other municipalities as well. It's policy 4.1.5, and it says, the county recognizes that normal farm practices create noise, dust, light, vibration, smoke, flies, and odors and that are associated with livestock and heavy machinery. Early morning and late evening activities are also required, especially during planting and harvesting periods. The county supports the right to farm concept, and when applying the policies of this plan, priority will be given to agricultural uses over other uses in an agricultural area. Now, keep in mind, you are not in an agricultural area. However, I think the principle of that still very much applies. We recognize that we are predominantly an agricultural or agricultural supportive community, and it's a big piece to our economy. And so part of that is by setting it as a class 4 puts the burden on the landowner. However, we've learned some additional things through our interactions with residential development adjacent to farm areas out in the county. So often when we deal with, typically this is through the plan of subdivision, but this is also something we could do through the development agreement that will be tagged with the plan of condominium. You would further place a warning, or maybe not a warning, but they would be, any landowners would be advised that, look, you're next to noise creating agricultural uses. Don't expect a lot of sympathy from the city of Sarnia or from the village. Like you knew what you're getting into. We've also gone to the step in some of our communities looking at working with our developers to create handouts or flyers when we've been doing some of these plans of subdivision to say, welcome to your new home that is next to an agricultural area. And here's some of the things you need to think about and realize. Farmer's going to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're going to smell stuff you probably never smelled before. And all of this, you know, and trying to do it in a lighthearted way, but also in a way to say, welcome to your new neighborhood. Agriculture is the priority, but you happen to live next to it. So we have learned a few things through our work in various other municipalities that we'll probably look to as well. I don't know if you wanted to add anything from the applicant's perspective.
Yeah, through your worship, I was also just going to say, yeah, we understand the importance of Cargill, their operation as it is, and yeah, we do not intend to limit that in any way, limit their productivity in any way. The onus is on us to, as a sensitive land use coming in, to, you know, put those measures in place, put those clauses in place that essentially have us coexist. We have spoken with Cargill and we're just trying to confirm some of their operating procedures so that we can actually incorporate those into our noise study, into our mitigation measures, so that we, again, can coexist. But again, the onus is on us to incorporate those measures and implement them on our development so that we can limit any potential issues.
Great. Deputy Mayor.
If I may, I don't know who will answer this, whether it's Ken or not,
We'll
but
toss it.
yeah. So do you know, are Cargill or the marine industrial work, are they subject to any type of noise bylaw as far as not being able to operate after a certain hour currently? And are we worried that if not, that these new residents may start to push for an 11 p.m. curfew or whatever? That's what I worry about.
It's my understanding that as an industrial facility, generally surrounded by other land uses, that they would have some sort of restrictions. I'm not 100% sure on what those are or what the guidelines are around them, but I do believe they are restricted to a certain limit as of right now without this proposed residential development. I'm just not sure what those are at this point, but.
Oh, if I may, Mr. Park, are you aware if Cargill has operating hours?
I know they have some major concerns, but with dust complaints already.
Yes.
Mostly from the marina and the city of Sarnia. But certainly a corn dryer can't be shut down at 11 o'clock at night any more than Nova be shut down at 11 so.
Right, okay,
So they need to run 24 hours a day during the corn harvest.
good to know, thank you.
But I don't know if they have any certifications that can answer that.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, and the same with a freighter that's in for emergency repairs and needs welding done at 3 a.m. That's gonna have to happen, and I just worry that residents will move in and then start to petitioning and
And
But-
that is something that yes, we are trying to consider what Cargill's operation looks like, what the marina operation looks like, so that we can essentially incorporate those into our clauses, into, when future residents potentially buy into this property, that they would be aware of all those operating hours.
And just to add, Mayor Grimes, usually when these sorts of clauses through the class designation come in. I've seen these applied in other provinces and in other different ways. What it does is it can go quite specific to say that by virtue of this classification and by virtue of being notified, you don't really have any ability to petition and whatnot. And I'll give you an example that's a more urban example, but not necessarily industrial. At the city of Calgary, you have the Calgary Stampede. Well, if you look right around it, it's all high-rise, multi-use, mixed-use development. But what typically ends up happening because of similar legislation and provisions out in Alberta, you can apply through caveats on title that the residents have no ability to call the city and lodge complaints or petition the city to restrict the stampede in any way, shape, or form, because that site doesn't just get noisy during the 2 weeks of stampede. There are all sorts of other events that activate the midway and the event area.
Right.
And so what that does is it shuts them down. The reality is this developer will do everything they possibly can through site design, caveats, everything. People will still call.
Mhm.
But this is where council, regardless of whether it's the village or the city of Sarnia, knowing that they've been classified and done these things on title, have the ability to then go and say, well, no, you've been warned. No, we're not going to do this. But ultimately, there will be calls regardless. The best that we do, even with all those flyers and things like that, our rural municipalities still get phone calls to. That we unfortunately don't have the ability to tell Bell that, no, they can't call you for this reason.
Thank you.
Or move the Blue Water Bridge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We've had those calls.
I know I've been going to the
We're
gym.
gonna close it for a couple months, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, you should also note too that this development is in the village of Point Everett. Cargill's in the city of Sarnia, so we don't control the noise bylaw in the
Correct.
city. So that would be another complication.
Correct.
Anyone else? Hey, sorry. Yes,
I'm not on the list. Say any words?
yes, you may. But you need to come up here, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. My name is Mary Martin. I live at 1725 Willowbrook Crescent. I'm also the president of Lambton Wildlife, which is a nature club and a land trust that operates. And we have members who live in Point Everett and across Lambton County. Our concern is with the wildlife value of the lands that are currently in question. And we haven't been able to find the environmental impact study. And it seems like decisions are being made without looking at the wildlife value. This property is on a Christmas bird count every year, and there are birds in that vicinity. There have been rumors of all kinds of some species at risk in this particular property. And I have been unable to find if that type of wildlife value, I have been able to find that this land has not been designated as a significant woodland anymore because of the trees in it. I presume, even though that the cottonwood trees is considered one of the keystone species for wildlife value. So I guess my question would just be, have those considerations already been taken into account? And is it part of your decision when you agree or make this change?
Through you, your
Thank
worship,
you.
yes, an environmental impact study was prepared. If you give me your email address, I can send that to you. But yes, they did essentially assess all of the vegetation and species on the property. And where, where we can protect them, we will. However, some of them will have to be relocated to the north of the canal. But again, those studies were prepared. I'm not a professional by any means in that field. However, a study was done, and they did several site visits over several seasons, where essentially they did consider all of that. So I can send that to you for your use as well if you'd like, but yes, it was considered.
Okay, and relocation of certain species at risk, particularly snakes, is not usually very effective. And, we found that with the button garter snake and the relocation we can't tear apart. So I would just like you to consider the wildlife value of the whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have no one else wants to speak, so I need a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? Oh. Are there any other questions of council? For staff or the applicants, anyone, the FEMA runs?
Yeah, just following up on the last presenter, Ms. Martin, I wonder if one of you could comment just on the relocation of this species at risk, because this community is familiar with the snakes and their needs. And I don't know how far you want to expand on anything you're doing with land to ensure they have a safe habitat.
Yes, through you, your worship, through the rezoning application, we went through, again, quite detailed studies. However, the EIS was submitted and it was generally accepted. However, further studies are required to do that. However, there are lands north of the canal where those snakes could or other species at risk could be accommodated. And those studies have also been completed to the north of the canal. So there is habitat there in terms of the details of that. Again, that would be submitted through the draft plan and condominium application process. It was considered through the zoning process. And again, all of those seasonal studies have been completed. So we know what's there. In terms of, any future relocation, those are still being considered, so being studied. So.
And were there any comments included in that study regarding how the proximity to their home now and how they will survive that relocation?
Yes, I believe that is in the recommendations portion of the report. I'm just trying to think back to it, but yes, again, yes, they will be relocated potentially across the canal. But there were a few locations considered, so some of it might be like a portion of it might be on our lands. It was still kind of up in the air, but potentially across the canal, but because of the proximity, because of the similar lands across the canal, it would be a similar habitat to what they currently have.
And just to add, Deputy Mayor Grimes, and through you, your worship, just to kind of spell out the next steps, and Mr. Preston touched on this. So this is the beginning of the process. So really what's all before you, and perhaps Jim, if you put back up the presentation, but the very last slide with the map diagram that showed the subject site, really what's before you. Actually, you don't really need to do that because it doesn't illustrate what I was trying to do. What is before you this evening? The question is, considering that site has 3 different residential zones in the EP1 zone, the question before you this evening is changing all of those into one standard residential zone. So the EP1 would go away. The residential marina 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 would cease to exist on this site, and it would just be zoned the residential marina 1.6 with a holding symbol. The next step in the process is the draft plan of condominium, which is a process done through the county of Lambton. So the county is the approval authority, but there is still a public process. So we'll be back in this council chambers when we get to the point that application is deemed complete. Despite the fact that the province removed the requirement for the public meeting, unfortunately, the county official plan still has that in, so we are still holding them until we get that amended, if council wants us to do that. And I mean county council, not, so there will be another presumably public meeting here through that process. That's where a lot of those additional studies that have been mentioned, are the rubber is really gonna hit the road, because that's where the conditions are for anything related to species relocation through those studies. That's where those conditions are going to apply. And that would be, those conditions are there to ensure that it happens, that they actually made that, they provide the studies to the proper, the Ministry of Environment or the Conservation Authority, and that the sign off has been done, so that when we finally make, the conditions are completed, then the condo plan can be registered. So that's the next step in the process, which would then create that. You would call them lots, but it is a plan of condo, so it's slightly different because of the ownership model. And then there is the site plan, and that's truly where the site is designed. That is not a public process. That is a very technical internal process with the municipality. And then that process is done internally and approved through staff. But your questions and concerns, it's sort of the next part of the process. And it would be part of the draft conditions.
Thank you, thank you.
I have one question.
Council Burgess?
This doesn't really affect the development, but the former golf course lands, if we're using that potentially as an environmental protected area, should we be zoning it as such at some point? If we're moving our endangered species there?
Through your worship, I think that's something that we can take back to the landowner, considering it is their land.
Just if we're losing one and we're moving, I think species there, would that be the next logical step?
Yes, through your worship. Again, the Conservation Authority did make that comment through the circulation of this application. We were primarily focused on these lands for the time being. However, at a future meeting or potentially in the future, if that was necessary, we would consider it. It just, wasn't in the scope of this application currently, but it was a comment that came up. So we have, we've looked into it or we've, assessed it to a certain degree, but.
I'll just add, it's something for us to flag as we move through the next steps in the process, because just thinking ahead, it could be a condition of the draft plan of condominium that be addressed through there. It could be a separate conversation. There's a number of ways that we could address it.
But right now, we know it can't be built on, so that's already determined.
Hmm.
It's clear that there's no building on that land.
Just by the designation of it.
And we close the public portion.
Any more questions?
Any other final questions before we close the matter? Yes, sir.
You, public allowed to, are these questions from you right now, or is this
Questions from-
public?
No, you can ask a question.
Okay.
No,
You're saying I
no,
have.
no,
You're saying-
Sorry, you closed the.
Sorry,
public
I
meeting.
closed it, sorry.
No, my understanding was, we do things differently in Point Edward.
No,
Just so you know,
But I
we
mean-
closed
yeah.
the public portion,
yes, but I can
and
ask.
that was the end of the questions.
Okay,
So that's not doing it differently. I
no,
followed
no,
the
no, I'm
process.
just wondering if I could ask a question, but I just wanted to verify that, and you said no, so I won't.
Thank you. If you want to send it in, I can get an answer.
I'm just appointed through you, Mayor.
Okay, yes.
The beginning, is there gonna be an open discussion after this meeting with the resident? Any other discussion?
On this,
This is
this is
Yeah.
it.
the open meeting. So now Ken will touch on the process
Yeah.
in a second, but
Yeah, okay,
there'll be a meeting at a meeting in July. There'll be a bylaw come forward. But Ken will address how that.
So just through you, your worship, so that you've concluded the public portion of this meeting. So at this point, presuming that there are no further questions from council to myself or to the applicant, what council needs to do is provide us direction. So in the report, we provided you a recommendation, which was to receive the report for, I believe it was receive the report for information and direct us to bring the bylaw in July. You've held your public meeting, so the decision at council in July is purely technical, which means that you'll have a report from us that will summarize the events of this meeting and the application again. And then you'll make your decision at that point. The next steps, as I mentioned, is the plan of condominium. So when that application comes forward, much like this application, adjacent residents will be notified. There'll be an ad in the newspaper, and there will be a public meeting held here in council chambers. That is a county process. And we'll be back to discuss the actual plan of condominium at that point.
Councilor Burgess has a motion.
Council Burgess,
I'll move that recommendation, our staff recommendation.
seconded, Council Mandu.
Do we want it read out?
I'll tell you what I've got here. That the report we received and filed, and that staff be instructed to prepare a bylaw to bring forward to the meeting of July 25th, 2023 to implement the rezoning, the proposed rezoning.
Just a point of order, their recommendation is July 11th. Are you,
No,
no?
no, July 20, there's no, we may or may not have a meeting on July
Okay.
11th.
Oh, sorry.
That's what's.
Okay.
We may,
That-
but
that's-
that's
just
the one
the
for sure.
report.
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
whichever is the appropriate date. then. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, that's carried.
And that was Councilor Burgess and
And Council Mandu.
Mandu.
Okay. Move on to the agenda. Just give a minute for those who wish to, to leave.
We have a race to adopt, right?
So next is business.
Okay, we're going to move on in our meeting. The next piece is new business. And the first item on new business is declaration of council vacancy.
I'll move that the resignation from council by Lauren Drury be accepted and the seat be declared vacant.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
And then there's a motion that we go in camera. And then I'll make a motion that council go in camera later in this meeting to discuss the possibility of appointing a person to fill the vacancy on council due to the resignation of Councillor Lauren Drury.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay. The next item is curb cut applications, and the first one is 201 Louisa Street, Dan and Diane Cadu. Jared? What's Jared?
I can,
Oh.
this is a fairly straightforward, so 201 Louisa at the corner of Alexandra and Louisa. The new home, the new house built there. They'd like to move their curb cut to the east of the existing curb to align with their garage. And they've got a minor variance earlier to permit this. This is the actual curb cut. So there's recommendation to approve the curb cut subject to a couple of conditions. That all assets, all village assets to be restored to original condition or better. That's like sidewalks, curbs, that the curb be no more than 9 meters and that the existing curb cut be filled in.
I'll move that motion.
Seconded by Council Burgess. All in favor? That was done. The next one is 106 Victoria Ave. Marilyn Roberts.
I'm not Jennifer keeping up with this. So this is 106 Victoria, which is almost right down to Livingston Street. And they have a double wide garage and just a single entrance curb cut. So they are asking to have it widened out to match the width of their garage. Same thing here as far as recommendations. They're just one less condition here. And that's just because because there's no existing curb cut they're filling, and they're just widening the existing. So the conditions are that all assets be returned to the original condition or better, and the curb cut does not exceed 9 meters.
I'll move this motion.
Seconder, Certainly Grimes, all in favor? Well, that was a new owner who just moved into that house that requested that. Okay,
Okay,
or moving on to the open burn bylaw.
okay. So this is, as we council's aware, we spent a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours last week with the lawyer. Made a number of changes to the bylaw. And then the recommendation came forward, or discussion came forward to review a couple of things. One was to put some wording in to clarify around cooking fires. Just to make it very clear that a cooking fire, as soon as a cooking fire is done, so it's being, like, cooking fires are allowed 24 hours a day, but just a requirement that the cooking fire be extinguished immediately upon when you're done using the cooking fire, you put the fire out immediately. So that somebody can't argue that, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, their recreational fire has become a cooking fire at that point. So just some wording around that. And then the second suggestion, the existing clause in the proposed bylaw talks about open burns needing to have permission of council to take place at all. And that's what the current proposal states, that it needs council approval. And the idea was to change that it would need approval of the fire chief or his designate. And then council would be an appeal mechanism for the chief's decision. So those are the 2 things that we were brought forward for discussion. So if we can make those clarifications tonight, and then we could, I'd be in a position to circulate this out as we promised to residents, circulate it out tomorrow morning. And then we would have the bylaw on the agenda on June 27th for approval at that point.
So could we just clarify, because I think a couple of people aren't understanding, an open burn is not somebody's backyard fire. An open burn is making an application to have a fire Stanton Cray Park or at the waterfront or somewhere in the village that is not somebody's yard.
So it's like,
No one has even done one that I.
yeah,
For me,
it doesn't happen in the village very often. I think it's been asked maybe twice in the time I've been here, and the chief has said no both times.
And another solid example is if the development at Exmo Street, they want to burn a bunch of brush and leaves, and that would be an open burn. And again, we would not ultimately allow that, but
Yeah, the chief would probably say no.
yeah. So an open burn means just burning sticks, twigs, rubbish, that type of thing.
Nikki?
Just a clarification. So this, little thing that we're doing right now has absolutely nothing to do with what we were doing, saying before about the open burn, how we all got together and voiced our concerns about, recognition of recreational and all that. Is this?
So it's all part of the same bylaw. We council, through meeting with their lawyer, has come up with what they want to do with recreational burns. It's all in the same bylaw, and it will all be circulated tomorrow morning. So these are so we went all through it on Thursday. And then what the decision was at that time, we'd give council kind of over the weekend to have one final look at it before it went into the public. And then those 2 things are the only things that came out that we wanted to just have a little bit more talk about before it went public.
So the meeting in the 28th is.
27.
Or 27th is null and void.
No, it's,
No.
oh no, that's where the final decision.
Okay, I'm just wondering
That's
about
the-
what's, because. But you said no tomorrow. I don't mean to be. But.
No, that's No, that's right. So tomorrow morning.
Yep.
We'll send out through Constant Contact again, and all our social media stuff. We'll send out the new proposed bylaw.
Okay.
And so that people can have a look at it. And then our intention is to, at least potentially pass the bylaw on the 27th.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Yeah, and I did noticed a couple of typos and inconsistencies, so I just like in one section, it says 5 meters from the structure, yet in another section, 3 meters from the structure, things like that, like. I'm happy to just forward you, like,
Yeah, I would love
I
that.
always like it when someone edits my stuff, so if I
Yeah.
just do it as a,
I thought we'd caught all that stuff, but
No,
if
no,
there's
no.
something missing, that's,
you know what it's like.
yeah.
I know it's,
But that's not the final product.
No, but if he's,
Yeah,
if he sees
yeah,
the typo
yeah,
in it, that's
yeah.
great.
So maybe it's not in the final product. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you
Yeah.
bring it forward to me and that
Yeah.
would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I may be wrong.
So do we want to move the two changes separately or collectively?
How, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, the first one was, there was some, whether it's necessary or not. So why don't we do it separately, which was the
Okay.
one regarding cooking fires, cooking appliances, in that they must be extinguished immediately and be used solely for the purpose of cooking food. That's my motion for that change. This is,
Second that.
okay.
Okay.
And, in favor, sorry,
And just so you know, where I think I'm gonna do that in the definition of cooking fire.
okay,
And so it'll say the current definition means a small confined fire that is supervised and used to cook food on a cooking appliance, including but not limited to a grill and or barbecue.
Mhm.
Cooking fires must be extinguished immediately upon finishing cooking.
Okay.
So it'll, and
Okay, all in favor? Okay. And then the next one.
and I'll move the
is
second one, which was,
the open burn issue.
yeah, that open burns be approved by the fire chief or their designate.
do you know which clause that was just off the top? I think it's like number
I think 13 kept bouncing in my head.
14 in that range. Or 13.
Eight.
So the current, yeah, open air burnings are not permitted in the village of Point Edward without prior written approval from the council of the village of Point Edward or their designates. And so that'll change to without prior written approval from the fire chief of the village of Point Edward or his or their designate.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly simple change.
Also, the fee schedule.
So we
Schedule
vote-
A will need to be updated to reflect that as well.
All in favor? Okay, those two things are done.
Thank you. Speaking of fires,
Yes, yeah. We just move right into the engine truck replacement on the new fire truck.
So we were hoping, we've been working with E1 and 1200 degrees
Thank you.
on a proposal for a new truck. That we still have not gotten the pricing through Canoe. But we're, as was discussed at the fire committee meeting, if we don't act on this right away, the increase in cost could be in the range of $180,000 within the next couple of weeks. They're changing to a new engine for these trucks, which is the engine itself is $80,000 more than the existing one, but they've got one set aside for us. And then there's a 4.5% increase just overall in the price of the vehicle. So they're talking in the range of 180,000. So at the last round of committee meetings and council meetings, a motion was passed to authorize moving forward with E1. And then this just another motion to confirm that because we'll have to act pretty quickly when it does come in.
So just to clarify, what this does is set our price so that we don't get these increases, but we won't be getting the truck for approximately 2 years. So we don't pay for it until 2 years, but if we don't, and we went through the exact same thing when we bought the other truck, they were gonna raise the price at the end of June if we didn't come up with the, firm up our price on our agreement, and we did, but we anticipated that we wouldn't be getting it for 2 years, so it's setting price now and getting the truck 2 years from now.
And hoping that the American dollar tanks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
so I'll move the recommendation that the CAO and fire chief are authorized to proceed with signing an agreement to purchase a new engine truck through E1 and 1200 degrees using the canoe procurement program.
I'll second that.
Okay, Councilor Burgess, all in favor? Okay,
Anyway, and just to clarify, we did have a great discussion on it at committee, and staff provided us with a lot of good details and reasoning, and
Yeah.
so it's.
that I said, I remember. I remember exactly the time when we bought the last truck. We went through the same thing, that they were going to raise prices at the end of June. We had to commit to set the price and firm it up, so we did, so. It's the market,
No railings.
railings.
I can talk about the railings, that's my committee. Through our health and safety inspections, we've identified a risk at the environmental plant. And the recommendation was made to install railings. One of our health and safety inspectors that did the assessment had said if someone was to fall into that particular area, they would be suffocated. It's very important to have it rectified immediately. So I'm going to move that approval be granted to the manager of environmental services to proceed with authorizing the low bidder to proceed with construction and installation of the required safety railings.
I'm just creating suspense to see whether I'm going to second it or not.
Oh, since you're the only option,
I'm the only one here.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll second that.
okay, all in favor? So just to clarify too, when we discover something that is a safety concern, it doesn't matter, like it's a top priority, even though we hadn't budgeted for it, then we look to our budget and figure out. But you cannot put the employees at risk once you identify a hazard and know it's there. So that's where this came from.
In community event stuff.
Just,
Should Tim,
yeah,
did he go, or
I think we went that way.
I think we went in the law.
We did a lap around.
Oh, he did a lap around. He's not.
Okay.
okay,
Okay, just a reminder then, we have this big party coming up on June the 22nd. Point Edwards Canada Day starts at 4 o'clock at the waterfront. All kinds of activities are planned. Face painting and
Bouncy
bouncy
castles.
castles and
food,
food, pizza. We have a donation of the water truck from Laws Aqua. So we'll I think there's so many water bottles to hand out for the first few, and then there's sort of water trucks there. So we're hoping for the best weather.
And just to add on that, if I may, if you haven't been downtown,
Oh,
we have
yes,
some beautiful new banners celebrating Canada Day, and it's very festive. And that was part of our 2023 budget to make better use of those assets. And we're very happy with how it turned out.
and then after Canada Day, they put up another set of banners, the other ones, so you get another change of scene down there. So that was one. And then, of course, Sarni's is July 1st with the parade, and they moved up the start time of the festival to 1 o'clock. Used to be 1:30 at the we call that the theater place down there where they kick it off.
Yeah.
The show, the
Band
stage,
shell, the band
the
shell.
band shell. They moved it up to 1 o'clock from 1:30, so.
And then if I may, one other worth mentioning, Kinsman Rib Fest is this weekend at Centennial Park, and the Village of Point Edward is a silver sponsor, and we're proud of our relationship with that. That's another good use of our MAT tax as far as supporting festivals and events that bring people to the immediate area.
in.
Centennial.
Centennial.
Yeah.
Did you have any public announcements, anything that, we talked about Canada Day and Rib
No, I
Fest
didn't. No.
and our Canada Day and Sarnia Canada Day and Rib Fest.
Father's Day on Sunday.
Oh. Oh, how did I forget? Okay, bylaws, nothing. So I have to go down to confirmation bylaw.
No.
No?
in
Oh,
camera.
sorry, I'm sorry. We're going in camera to close off on our issue with our vacancy. to talk about personnel, sorry, not personnel, personal. So it's allowed under the municipal act to talk in camera.
So moved.
Seconded, Council Mongoose. And then we'll have a report out
Are we up?
afterwards.
Not yet.
Okay.